to this morning's session. I'm really looking forward to this. Phil will be saying, what do you mean? We're in the Dundee fortnight at the moment, which is the traditional time that everybody in Dundee used to get their holidays. But actually, it's surprising how many people have been taking holidays. I know that a number of our team are. And so it couldn't be a better time for us to be telling people how important it is to get out and spend their money. And, the government scheme is kicking in as of Monday next week, where you can go and spend some of the UK government's money in local restaurants. I know lots of people are away having staycations, so buy local and kind of supporting businesses is hugely important. So looking forward to us talking about that today. Just a bit of an update, I guess, on some of the things that the Chamber has been doing. So if you're eagle-eyed, you'll notice that some of the team have managed to get a haircut, and a number of us have been enjoying and taking some holidays over the summer months. But we have got a slightly slimmed down version of our normal webinar programme. And what we've got coming up in August, actually, there's a few Chamber events that I just want to highlight in case that you haven't seen that we're doing them. So for members, we've got our AGM, and we should have really had that in May, and we normally have a fantastic business showcase. This time around, the AGM is a bit slimmed down as well. We're just going to do the formal business of our AGM, but that's happening in the morning of the 19th of August. But on that day, we're launching our very first 7 Steps to Personal Wellbeing programme, and that's really been born out of a few of the webinars that we did early on in lockdown, looking at personal resilience and mindset and how people were coping with the scenarios that they were finding themselves in. And so we've designed a 7-week-long programme with a number of experts from across Chamber members, whether they're people that are going to come and talk to us about volunteering and the personal benefits that people get from volunteering, or whether it's about mindset or it's about actually thinking about how you invest in yourself and look after yourself so that you can look after other people. So I'm really looking forward to that programme starting. We will be repeating that later in the year, because I'm very pleased to say that programme is full. We thought that there would be a demand for it, but we weren't sure how quickly we would see that demand pick up. So we will be having lots of online conversations that support that programme as well. So every week we've got a local expert that's going to talk about their piece, but we're going to have some social media, some questions that they are going to be posing. So keep an eye out for that, because it will be a much bigger, wider conversation than the actual sessions themselves. And then I know Sarah and our team is looking at a couple of other webinars, but they're not live yet. But what we do have live is a Making the Most of Your Chamber membership event. So on the 1st of September, we're going to be getting everybody together and just walking through some of those benefits, some of the things that we've done that are new that maybe you might not have noticed while we've all been in lockdown. And then the other thing that you can currently sign up for is a tri-chamber speed networking. So we're going to be using Zoom, doing a bit of virtual speed networking, and that's always a really popular event because it connects you with members from Perthshire and Fife Chambers of Commerce. So a good chance just to expand your network if you're not feeling really Zoom fatigued by then. But that's really a bit more about the Chamber and what the Chamber's been doing. I'd rather that we get a chance to hear from our speakers today. So I'm going to get out of the way in a little bit, but first of all, I'd like to introduce Sarah Webster to you from Hudson International. She's going to talk to us today about what they've been doing. They're currently our webinar and our social media sponsors at the moment. So if you're interested in kind of learning more about, why a company would have done that, then come and give me a shout later on. And then so Sarah will hand over to Phil Prentice from Scotland's Towns Partnership, and that's really the kind of the main thrust of today's conversation. It's about the brilliant work that's been going on to support our towns, and then I'm going to come on and talk a little bit about some of the local work that we're going to do, and then there'll be lots of time for questions, and let's have a conversation and see how we can really come up with some great ideas and kind of ask Phil lots of awkward questions, because he's pretty good at dealing with those. So Sarah, if you would like to unmute yourself and come in when I can hear you, I'll get out of the way.
Yeah, that's me. I'm just going to share some slides. Here we go. So hi everybody. Good to see you this morning. I thought I would start with a little bit about myself, because as this slide says, I'm new to the Dundee business community. I've spent around about the last 15 years down in Edinburgh working for two of the big network digital marketing agencies. In between my time at those networks, I spent a couple of years in Dunfermline working for Canvas Holidays as their European head of marketing, which led me nicely to the role with Hutchison's, which I started on the 1st of June. So whilst I did accept the job before all of this, I was the crazy person that started a job in the middle of lockdown. However, I think it's been going pretty well. My knowledge of the business has been expanded greatly whilst working remotely. So I'm here to give you a bit of a rundown of the brands that we have here. So Hudson Technologies is probably the brand that we're most known for. It was launched in 1991 by our CEO, Bruce Hutchison. And a few years later, he brought in his brother, Mark Hutchison, as our technical director. So to this day, we're still a family-run business. Bruce and Mark are directly involved in our day-to-day runnings, which is a really nice feel to the business. We specialise in innovative technology solutions, which sounds very fancy, but actually can be distilled down into 5 areas, which is audiovisual, lighting, access control, smart cards and wearables, and data and telecoms. And we supply these services in various combinations to a whole host of businesses. We specialise in the health and fitness industry, and as you can see from the logos of some of the people we work with, there's quite a heavy slant towards that. But actually, people quite often don't know that we've got a strong presence in the retail and hospitality and leisure verticals, which we're really working to expand just now. Hutchison Technologies' sister brand is Hutchison International, and whilst it's lesser known, it has actually sat alongside Hutchison Technologies through all of the years. Hutchison International are supply chain management specialists, and historically have supplied products such as medical devices and smart meters. But it was really when COVID happened that Hutchison International came into its own. We saw very quickly that there was a requirement and a need to get behind, and Bruce was really keen that we use our existing skills to help support the COVID response. We already had a really strong supply network in China, and we were able to push them really quickly to look to supply PPE, namely gowns, testing kits, and predominantly face masks to businesses in the UK. And I know we're not really unique in that respect. There's lots of businesses that have pivoted and did so probably just as quickly. However, the benefit that Hutchison International had ahead of those businesses is that with our already existing supply chain, the quality and the reliability of the products that we were sourcing was superior than some. I know a lot of businesses bought in PPE from supposedly accredited suppliers, and actually those accreditations didn't check out when the goods were in the UK, so they weren't able to be used. So we were able to be really rigorous in checking the quality of those suppliers and making sure that we were bringing reliable sources at prices that were suitable to the businesses in the UK. That reliability led us to supply the NHS. We were supplying local government, both in Scotland and in England, and other private businesses. That meant that we were really well received. We've been publicly endorsed by both the NHS and the Scottish Government. If anybody's been keeping an eye on the papers over the last couple of weeks, you'll see that we were in the Courier over the weekend. We were in the Scotsman last week talking about the partnership that we formed with RBS Scotland to provide funding and finance to allow the NHS to buy in bulk into the UK and only part with their money when the goods were in their hands. So RBS worked with both us and NHS to allow those deals to be brokered. And now what we're doing as a business is looking at how we take the learnings from supplying those products and making this a sustainable part of the business moving forward. So continuing to supply face masks to the NHS and local government, as well as private businesses across the UK, and seeing how we can carry that forward into the coming months. That's Hutchison's in a 5-minute nutshell. So I will stop sharing, and Phil, I will pass over to you.
Thanks, Sarah, and good morning, everybody up in sunny Dundee. No, it's not sunny today, but it normally is. I love Dundee. I have to say, every time you pop off the train, there's like a new building, or else there's a new railway station or something that's just appeared in front of you. So it really is the city of discovery. You know, 10 years ago, I think it sort of lost its way a wee bit. There'd been a couple of big closures, but with good leadership and collaboration, chamber, council, and so on, I think the whole waterfront, you know, the whole vision for the city, the V&A, obviously the new railway station, the Sleepers Hotel, it's brilliant. It's actually brilliant just to see a city reinventing itself so quickly. Bang, along comes COVID, so everything's changed. So I think Keith is going to share a few slides just to give you an introduction, so you know more broadly what's happening between ourselves, Scottish Government, and trying to help localities. So let's begin by telling you about STP. STP was established in 2014. Scotland, by and large, is a nation of towns. We do support the cities as well, but 70% of the population don't live in cities. Some of the cities are quite small, you know, Perth, Stirling, Inverness. In any other context, they would just be market towns. But Scotland just has the 4 main cities in my mind, which is obviously Dundee, Aberdeen, Glasgow, and Edinburgh. And I have to say, it's the cities that are giving us the most concern in terms of people's reluctance to travel in. You know, you've got a big reliance on students and in Dundee, so it's hopefully we can get that sort of footfall back into the cities and to try to get them more vibrant again. So STP is a very small, agile disruptor. We basically pull together the complexity of town and city centres, so everything from central government, local government, low carbon agenda, housing, digital, energy, transport, culture, tourism. The list is pretty long. Our role, and probably the best analogy, is we are the spike at the top of a large umbrella, and we use that spike to go in and prod. We provide learning, resources, toolkits, funding, inspiration, ideas, collaboration, and partnership. But that's all we are. We're just a little disruptor that comes in and tries to get things moving, or to be available if people need a wee bit of help or information. So that is STP. We have 25,000 members across the country. All of the local government guys are partners, and genuinely we are trying our best to take the whole town, high street, city centre agenda forward. Next slide, please, Keith. So in addition to that, we also run Scotland's improvement districts. You would know these better as business improvement districts. We are in conversation with trying to get a Dundee bid up and running. We're trying to be much more ambitious with the improvement district concept, because we thought it had got a little stale. It was very much focused on the high street. Retail was challenged on the high street, so the tax base was diminishing. So we have started to drive new concepts around digital improvement districts, food and drink improvement districts, tourism improvement districts, community improvement districts, as well as our city and our normal towns. So again, that's another string turbo in terms of trying to create local collaborations where people self-invest in their own future, and who better to make decisions around their own future than the businesses in that town themselves. But we're trying to just expand that model a wee bit further, to bring in wider stakeholders, to up the agenda, to try and ensure that things like low carbon and sustainability and the changing demographic and housing opportunities and all of these things are woven together to create more community wealth in our town and city centres. Next slide, please, Keith. So that all sounded lovely, and then all of a sudden along came COVID. We had recently awarded with Scottish Government £50 million towards town centres. I believe Dundee got about £750,000. But COVID came along and sort of put a stop to everything. It's been the most disruptive thing right across society that we've ever encountered, and businesses have really suffered. You know, I have to say, I really do feel for businesses, both large and small, particularly in the city centres where people just have not been going. You rely on office footfall. People are now working from home. So it is going to be a long and hard slog. It's going to be a difficult recovery. So as soon as we realised the severity of the pandemic, we began conversations with the Scottish Government to see what could we do. What could we do to try and at least salvage parts of the economy, or to make sure that local infrastructure was in place to benefit local businesses and to try and help them navigate through the pandemic. So initially in March, we came up with the BIDS Resilience Fund. £1 million was issued out across 40 projects in Scotland. Dundee were allowed to repurpose some of their existing BID seed corn grant to help with a resilience response. And I have to say, hand on heart, between business improvement districts, chambers of commerce, town centre partnerships, traders associations, community groups, local authorities, everybody started to roll up their sleeves and get stuck into this. And in fairness, both UK and Scottish governments have done their utmost to try and secure the economy through the jobs retention scheme, through the deferral of VAT and tax, and and the grant schemes as well. So there's been a lot of effort to try and work with business through this pandemic to ensure we don't see a massive spike of unemployment and a very, very deep recession. So we'll see where we get to, but I think moving forward, we started to get the virus suppressed. And the next stage then was to move from resilience into recovery. A lot of the resilience projects focused on virtual high streets, digital marketplaces, hyper-local delivery infrastructure, offering advice and assistance. Chambers were running counselling sessions, to build in personal resilience, and also information sessions on how to access all the finance. So moving from that sort of in the trenches, open warfare stage into the slight relaxation of the restrictions has now seen, non-essential retail reopening and bits of the economy starting to open up again, cautiously, carefully, with COVID-19 compliance. So the next phase of funding was called the Towns and Bids Resilience and Recovery Fund. And that was more towards helping localities build an infrastructure to let their citizen population know that their places were safe and they were being managed. So managing the civic realm, looking at maybe even taking some of the traffic off the streets so people could be 2 meters apart, looking at social distancing markers, perspex screens, spit shields, all of that, to just give people comfort that if they do make the effort to get into their town centre or the city centre, it's going to be a much safer environment and that we're on top of it. Again, digital platforms to still connect to people who were unwilling or unable to get into the town or city centre, to make sure that they were still being fed and were able to get the opportunity to buy more. So that's the phase that we're in just now. Behind the scenes, this is all very operational. It's all very here and now. It's just dealing with an emergency. It's crisis stuff. Behind the scenes, we just took the opportunity to say, look, before this bug came, the economy was rubbish anyway. So we needed to just take a blank piece of paper and think, how can we rebuild from this and rebuild a better, fairer, greener society, a Scotland that would be more attractive for people to come and invest in, to come and live in. So we are undergoing a fundamental review of our town and city centres. It's been led by Professor Lee Sparks at Stirling University, and many stakeholder organisations, the likes of the Federation of Small Business, the third sector through Carnegie Trust, are all sitting on a board that will publish a new town centre policy come about November time. We already had internationally recognised policy. Lots of European countries were coming over to see what the Scottish Government were doing in terms of repopulating our town and cities, creating that low carbon footprint by getting populations living in the sort of ecosystems of towns and cities, looking at the low carbon agenda, local energy generation, storage, looking at the EV infrastructure revolution, the electric cars, etc., making our towns fit for that. Thinking about the housing products, nothing for young people, nothing for our parents' generation. Could we use this opportunity with a shrinking retail footprint to build in a denser population base, but also being cognizant of our changing demographic and the needs of older and younger people? But by doing that, we were creating economic resilience by having populations living closer to the retail offer and the evening economy and the culture and the leisure, so they would be able to engage and support that local economy. So all of these things were happening, but we now know that we have to lift this up, and people will be stuck for a long time in a social distancing manner, which means lots of people will not be returning to the office sector for probably into the middle of next year, which means our towns have got captive audiences of middle income earners who no longer have to drive to the city, who basically can engage with their local high street. And we have to think through what happens in cities. That's definitely something that we need to keep an eye on and try and support. I fully expect the Scottish Government to back up this new review with an infrastructure fund, a place infrastructure fund. So it's not just going to be a series of words. This is going to be very action focused. It's going to be about climate emergency. So how do we get rainwater gardens and tree planting, greening up of the infrastructure, more digital investment, again, looking at a fallow space within towns and cities, the space above the shops basically that could be used for housing, some of the office spaces that will not be taken up again in the near future, repurpose that for housing and other uses. So hopefully we'll get an infrastructure fund that will allow localities to take that forward. But the main thing I'm here today to talk about is the Scotland Loves Local campaign. So could we go on to the next slide, Keith? About 2 weeks ago, we launched Scotland Loves Local, and this is simplicity in itself. Basically, where we are with this pandemic is we must use staycations. We must stay at home. You can see what's happening across Europe as everybody went mad and headed to Spain and Portugal and Greece and Croatia. That the virus is beginning to make a return. So clear message is, please try to stay local. Go and reconnect with Scotland. It's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. You're keeping yourself safe, you're keeping your citizens and your neighbours safe. And you know what? You'll have a good time. You know, there's plenty of places in Scotland where you can actually stay. That's not just about a safety message, it's about an economic recovery message. If people spend their money in the local economy, that tends to flip 6 times. So the young girl who works as a trainee hairdresser in the centre of Dundee, now that you can get your hair done, the chances are she's going to be able to be kept on. She gets her pay, she walks out, she buys something for her mum, she goes to a coffee shop, she buys a cup of coffee. The coffee supply is, again, you know, Scottish based. All of this is just flipping that pound time and time again. If you go onto Amazon or one of the online platforms, that money disappears out of Scotland immediately. And there's probably not tax domiciled anywhere in the world. So thinking local, staying in Scotland for your holidays, spending your money in the local economy will allow a Scottish recovery to kick in much quicker. Take that down a level. So the staycation thing that First Minister and also Visit Scotland are trying to promote, this is where we kick in. So Scotland Loves Local. We have come up with this brand suite. We're running an STV campaign, which will also flip into Sky from now to Christmas. You'll have probably already seen the ads on the television. And the message is simple. Again, everybody has tried to be helpful through the pandemic. You know, before the pandemic, I think we had become very singular. We were quite materialistic. And I think we were quite angry with ourselves for becoming Americanized. This has shown the true nature of Scottish people. They have rolled up their sleeves. They've looked after the vulnerable. They've tried to help. This gives every single citizen in Scotland the ability to help us through the pandemic. If you spend your money in the local economy, Scotland will recover quickly. So this is a call to action for all of our citizens to think local first. Think that the shop that you pass by is actually not just bricks and mortar. It's the person in that shop could be your neighbour. It could be your cousin. It could be your family. The more that we spend in the local economy, the quicker Scotland will recover economically and build in resilience for the future. So when we do hit further issues further down the line, we have more resilience in terms of food security, supply chains, local economic wealth, less extraction, more tax being paid, and a faster recovery. So it's the most simple thing. Just think local first. I'm not daft. I know people will still need to go online and buy things. I do it myself. But where you've got the opportunity, and potentially even if you were just putting some of the savings you have on your fuel because you're not traveling such distances, put some of that into your local business. It's safe to go back into the town and city, support your local economy, because it's the heart of our community. It's the heart and soul of what we are. It's part of our DNA. So it is critical that we move forward with that. In addition to the television adverts, which will change over time to keep them more interested and for people to engage with, we're also doing a large media campaign with NewsQuest, DC Thomson, Press and Journal, to ensure all of the parts of Scotland can get to see the brand, how to engage with it, how to localise it. So Scotland Loves Local, you could have Dundee underneath that to say Dundee Loves Local, and then just try to get into the psyche of people's behaviour to get them to think local first and to tell them why that is so important. Explain the extraction, explain the economic recovery story, explain the community wealth building to them as part of this campaign. So we would plead to chambers, to business improvement districts, to local government to lift this campaign and to try and embed it. So the next phase, alongside both the broadcast television, the sort of mass media, the print media, we've also got into the digital platforms. So again, please use the hashtag, go to the website lovelocal.scot and just engage with this, because the brand suite is there for you guys to use and deploy. You can change some of the imagery to make it look like Dundee. You can change the people to make them local, but the brand itself, we just want that to be embedded in the entire population's thinking. Spend your money in Scotland, Scotland will recover faster and it will be stronger for the future. One of the upsides of the pandemic, there have been very few, but one of the upsides has been the ability to reconnect with our neighbours. We've had more time working from home. We've also connected with our community, with our green space locally. Now is the time to reconnect with our city and high streets and town centres. So it is a plea for people to engage moving forward. I'll just finish off before we take questions. The second phase of this programme is to drive a local currency platform. So many of our citizens have really gone the extra mile, whether it's chambers putting on seminars to support businesses, whether it's been individuals helping the vulnerable in their communities. There's always been examples of high street heroes or champions across the country. There's also the key workers and the essential workers, the people in the NHS, the emergency services people, the people who have worked in the grocery sector and the supermarket sector. Again, these guys have fed us through the pandemic and it's time to reward them. So we're thinking of establishing a national currency platform which could only be rewarded in the locality. So you could have a Dundee pound, you could have a Dundee loyalty card, a Dundee reward card, which can only be redeemed within Dundee postcode area. Likewise, Paisley, Falkirk, Dunfermline. So we are now engaging government about establishing a Scotland Loves Local currency platform that would do three things. Number one, it would create a loyalty card. So we would have a national loyalty card that again would be redeemed only in Scotland and town and city centres. We would create a reward system. So people who maybe undertake active travel or have gone the extra mile, they can be rewarded. Cycle into the town centre 5 times, you get a free cup of coffee, that type of thing. And also just the currency, the loyalty card. Again, you could gift that. So if there are individuals that you think are deserving of some sort of reward, instead of giving them an Amazon card, give them a Scotland Loves Local card. Again, they can go in and support the independent and retail sector within their local community. And it would go beyond retail. It would be for when cinemas open again, a wee bit like Eat Out to Help Out down south. That's going to be a programme that Scotland will benefit from also. But we want to embed our own Scotland Loves Local, and we think we can do that faster with a local currency. So that covers off what I wanted to say today. I'm quite happy to take questions if you want to find out a wee bit more on how to engage with that.
Thanks, Phil. That's fab. So we will definitely have time for some questions, and I've got a couple of things that I might just sow the seed of, and then I'll do a bit of an update on some of the local work we're going to do, and then we'll have time for questions. So I suppose to those of you that are kind of sitting listening to us today, I'm interested in what you think your community needs. So, have you got a burning idea that you'd love to see somebody take up, whether, as Phil's saying, it's something around that active travel, whether it's about digitising something, or whether it's about using our spaces differently to help businesses offered the right kind of service. So that's kind of one thing I think I would be interested in hearing about your thoughts. And then I think we've all seen businesses do some amazing things. I mean, the Chamber had never run a webinar before the 19th of March, and then all of a sudden, we're much more digitally enabled than we were, and the pace that we've all changed at. And I mean, we've seen some really local examples of this where companies like Les Turriff have had to really adapt their model and get their local fruit and veg to people that wanted to buy it, rather than it be all wholesale, which was really the way that their business was modelled on. So, there are a lot of businesses that have adapted really fast, but I suspect that there are a number of businesses that are, that have got their eyes shut and their fingers crossed that, when the government schemes run out, that they can come back to life in the way that they were before. And I think, the very clear message, I think, from us at the Chamber and from everybody else that's kind of talking to government and others, is that the way that we did things before, it can't be the way that we do things going forward. There's got to be an adaptation or a kind of a change to your model, and it's because we're not going to know what the economy is going to do, but we can't wait for the economy to rebound either. It looks like it's going to be a bit of a longer, V shape, W shape, U shape, whatever the economy shape is going to be. It's not going to be quickly enough to let us just go back to what we were doing. And many businesses have lost their summer season or have kind of lost their season. And I think Phil's right to talk about offices and the time when offices may come back, because we were hoping to go back to our office in the Chamber on the 1st of September, and I suspect that the First Minister's announcement today is not going to give us that phase 4 announcement that we were going to be planning for. But I've also heard a number of other businesses say we'll probably not go back to the office until the new year. Phil's saying it may be, particularly for bigger offices, I suspect longer than that, because trying to socially distance, trying to make sure your people are safe, trying to think about the cost of doing all that is going to be some real challenging times for businesses to work their way through it. So anyway, so that's, I guess, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts, but just talk a little bit about some of the local work that the Chamber and our partners are going to be doing. So I'm really pleased that we were able to look at the resilience funding and say, well, what could we do? So the Chamber immediately spoke to Dundee City Council and Angus Council and said, we know that they were already doing a lot of work. Both of those councils had got place funding and had already begun to do a bunch of adaptations and were talking with us to businesses about what support was needed. But the message was pretty loud and clear. There was work that was needed. There was some short-term work and longer-term thinking, but also, anybody that I think knows our Chamber knows we just quite like just to crack on and do things, and to be able to access some short-term funding to help us to do that has been really welcome. So we're going to be doing and we had a working title of it, seeded by Jennifer at Dundee City Council, of Love Dundee Local. So I'm really pleased, actually, that she's obviously been talking to you, Phil, because that fits bang smack into the message. And we want an app that will help take some of those businesses and take some of those lessons of the people, those businesses like Les Turriff and a whole bunch of other businesses. We did a webinar this week where we had Scott Brothers talking about their own e-commerce platform and how they've seen a dramatic shift from the demographic of people that would want to go to the shop to pick up their butcher meat and their steak pie, and they went from delivery drivers doing 5 wholesale drops in a day to 60 consumer drops in a day. And the impact, the logistical impact of them on their business and how those delivery drivers then became the face of their business has just been really interesting to hear about. But there are still lots and lots and lots of businesses out there that we could be spending our money with if we could get that technology on our phones and on our iPads and be able to use that. So we're looking to do a Love Dundee Local app, and very similar actually in the way that Phil was talking about with the Love Scotland Local. We definitely want to be able to offer that to those businesses that you would currently maybe want to have a takeaway from or do a click and collect from. So food and drink is absolutely right up their street, pardon the virtual high street pun. But also, I can see it working really well for gift shops. So there are a number of really brilliant shops in all our high streets, and if they could get on and you could access their gifts and be able to order that and just know that you can go and collect that at a time slot they give you, or have it delivered to your door, whatever your preference is and whatever works for them and their business. I think that would be really useful. We're very interested in how we could support the cultural attractions with people buying tickets in advance and helping them promote what they do. So, if there's a special exhibition, so often places like Verdant Works will get a brilliant special exhibition in, and if you could buy a ticket for that and know that you're going to be in a safe time slot, you can go in and spend your time looking at that museum or that cultural attraction, then I really think that would be something that we would all want to support and use an app for. Or, I can also think of, some businesses have done really well in pockets in local lockdown. So there's a brilliant local store in Dundee called the Floor Store that happens to be able to sell a certain brand of paint that everybody seems to want to get their hands on at the moment. It's a British paint brand. Everybody's repainting their kitchens and their units and their doors and all sorts of things, and they're a local stockist of that. And at the moment, their way of telling people they've got stock is to put pictures up on their Facebook page, and literally by the time you get to their door, the colour you wanted isn't in stock anymore. So I could just imagine so many different brands and sectors being able to use a local app, and I think we would all really like to be able to support and spend our money in those local stores. So we're really looking forward to getting that moving in Dundee. And then in Angus, our work's going to be digital and also business support, because Angus Council and Visit Angus already have some great apps in development. So their apps are really more focused on things to see and do and buy in the local area. So they're very much focusing on visiting Angus, showcasing the attractions, the things to do, the walks to have, the places to stay and all of that. So rather than have an app in Angus, we felt that would begin to make that a very, very crowded marketplace. But a digital directory, an online place that you can find all the businesses that really want to welcome your custom, plus also a marketing and really telling the world about all those businesses and all the places that you can do things. And if you're telling people to come and kind of come to your business as a staycation, then having some place that you can actually point them to that says you can go and buy your local groceries there, you can go and buy your gifts here, you can find things to do and walks and all sorts of other things. So we're looking at that. But we're also specifically looking at a couple of the towns in Angus. So we're going to run some early pilots that will then be able to roll out across the other parts of Angus. So Arbroath has got a brilliant high street. It has an amazing local food scene, and the restaurants and the food producers down in Arbroath are great. But some of those spaces are small, so the actual numbers of people that you can get in your business at the moment may be a challenge. And the high street possibly could be covered over if we can, work with the local planners to look at something like that, or look at some of the other local empty open air spaces or other empty spaces and look at pop-ups and help businesses actually just look at their current footprint, whether it's digital or physical, and actually work out, can we get the community to come together and do some really inspiring pop-up things that help get the actual community engaging with those local businesses, but get those local businesses thinking differently. So we're going to do that in Arbroath, and we're going to work with Brechin. There are a number of empty high street spots in Brechin, and how can we encourage other businesses to use those as pop-up spaces and use them as places for the community to get access to. So there's that, and then Montrose, we're also going to work with Montrose and work with local organisations like the local tourism organisations and some of the others that are in Angus, and just work to make sure that we're promoting Angus. And that one's going to, well, it's currently got a working title, Phil, of My Angus by Angus, but I suspect you're going to want to have a conversation about that. However, My Angus is something that Angus Council were already working with partners on. It's about pride in your place. And that is, I think, at the heart of everything that we're talking about. It's about, you know, encouraging local people, local businesses, but also I really liked what you said, Phil, about, you know, we've all got some spend that we're not spending at the moment. So whether it's £100 a week, as somebody literally told me this morning that they're saving on fuel, or whether it's, you know, we're not maybe out and about and we're not needing all these new clothes for work. Although don't tell my husband, because I have bought quite a lot of clothes in lockdown. But you know, we have all got spend that we would like to be supporting local jobs with. So yeah, this is all very hot off the presses, but we're about to kind of go into a whole bunch of stakeholder meetings and really talk more about the work we're going to do locally. So I'm absolutely up for talking to anybody that's keen to engage with us and support on that. But anyway, I'm interested in any questions you might have for Phil, because it's great to have his time on our session today. So if you want to drop a question in the chat or put your hand up and come in, that would be fine. As I say, I really was interested in what ideas you might have. You know, what spaces do you have in your communities that you would be thinking, oh, why is that not being used as a pop-up for our business, or why do we not think about using that space for, I don't know, restaurants to spill out into, or bars to be able to use. And Phil, while people are thinking, have you come, you know, so I mean, there's no such thing as a new idea, is there? I'm quite happy to steal anything that you've seen somebody do that's been just the brilliantest thing. So what have you kind of seen or heard about on your travels and the work that you guys are doing that you think, if we could only replicate that, what a difference that everybody would see?
To be honest, it's a mix of everything, Alison. We've seen a variety of approaches across the country based on the local need. It's been so disruptive. The pandemic has come across, it's happened so fast. We've had to sort of just get over the shock and then start reacting and muddle our way through. We're working in the dark to a certain extent, but I just, where I see progress is where you get local businesses coming together to discuss how best can we get things open safely again. So you take a look at somewhere like Milngavie, where they know they're still going to get quite significant footfall because it's the beginning of the West Highland Way. And they have looked at using some of the safer spaces for people money from Sustrans to make it much easier for people to socially distance along Milngavie, sort of fairly tight high streets. It's really just the infrastructure that people have been putting in to make it COVID compliant. And it's also, the key thing here, I think, is typically in town and city centres, the level of e-commerce uptake was historically always extremely low. People were reliant on an old-fashioned book of customers and would phone people and, you know, we've got a new set of, we've got new stock in, blah, blah, blah. Believe it or not, about 70% of businesses in town and city centres were not e-commerce enabled. This has forced them, and I looked at a butcher on the Perth Road in Dundee selling stuff online. It might be the one you were referring to. I was watching the orders drop in, and it was basically consumers buying 40 or 50 pounds worth of, you know, good high quality meat produce and getting it delivered to their door. That particular butcher didn't even have a Facebook page and had never been online in his life. Didn't even know what the Tinternet was, you know. So he has gone from literally having an established, everybody knows me by word of mouth model, to now having a resilient online platform, which is bringing them in about $7,000 a month in sales online. So the uptake of e-commerce has been phenomenal. And if the Chamber and the Council and Dundee One, whatever groups are in the town, try to get as many businesses online as possible, because this pandemic is with us for a long time. It's with us forever. And until there's a vaccine or a cure, this will come back in waves, and there will be lockdowns, and then there will be reopenings. So if you've got the resilience of an online channel, you'll be able to survive. So genuinely think digital. There's no point reinventing the wheel. Lots of these platforms are already out there. You've got MTC and Dundee who are great at it. Just look at how you can bend and tweak and build in flexibility to make sure as many retailers as possible can get online. But the one thing I would like to point out, if your guys have got very local ideas, the next phase of funding, so that once the Towns and Bids Resilience and Recovery Fund is issued, which I think is probably this week, the next wave of funding will be Scotland Loves Local. Now, there will be two strands to that. There will obviously be the creation of the national currency platform and the rewards, but there will also be a fund for hyper-local stuff that hasn't been funded with the previous money. So say, for example, you wanted to build a canopy over your shop so you can get outside furniture. We could pay for the furniture, we could pay for the canopy. We maybe want to get a brand, the Scotland Loves Local brand on the canopy, but there will be another wave of funding that will actually allow people to put in fairly critical local, hyper-local infrastructure because they have realised, oops, I just need that one thing, that's a barrier for me. So there will be another fund announced pretty soon that will allow maybe some of the people that are in your group today that come up with ideas to come forward and apply. And it will be a very straightforward, simple process because we don't expect it to be huge sums of money. It's going to be a couple of £100 here, £1,000 there. We'll basically try to get this money out as quickly as possible. So there will be more Scottish Government support coming through the Scotland Loves Local campaign. But really get your businesses together to remind the Dundee population that their city centre is critical. In the future, we still want people coming to the city. We want people, mainly from the British Isles this year in particular, to staycate. But Dundee's got so much to offer. Just make sure it's done, efficiently and safely. But it can be. I mean, I've been out and about more this last couple of weeks. Travelled from the West Coast Inverkip over to Edinburgh to meet the Scottish Government. The trains are safe. The stations are safe. We just need to manage the numbers, in terms of the numbers of people on public transport. But, got to Edinburgh, was able to go to the pub, do my quick recognition code, send them the wrong phone number in case I had to self-isolate, and then sit and have a couple of cups of coffee. It was great. People crave that social contact. And yes, it's different. And yes, it is still quite challenging, but it is fantastic to be able to get out to your high street and just sense some sort of normality again and have that social connection. And if we underpin that message by saying every pound you spend in Dundee flips around Dundee 6 times, whether it's for a wage or for a cup of coffee or for supply chain, that is you almost count it as £6. You go onto Amazon, bye-bye, disappears, and you probably end up with some trash being delivered to your doorstep a week later. Go in and support your local businesses because that is our DNA. That's the best example, is everybody wants to help. The most simple thing you can do, which will help dramatically, is just to spend your money in the local economy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other, you talked a lot about, you mentioned climate change and the sort of the net zero a bit as well, Phil, didn't you? And I mean, I think we've been talking about that. We've had some webinars about green recovery, and that also seems to be another of the buzzwords at the moment, is that there seems to be a lot of funding available for innovative kind of net zero type ideas. And it's one thing that we've certainly heard businesses say that they're glad that there's not as much travel, but people are not doing as much international travel for business and whatnot. But I think the active travel is really interesting, isn't it? And we've definitely seen, in Angus, there's going to be a lot of work looking at that. But have you seen anything particularly that some places have done? That I was interested how they actually even measure something like you've cycled into your city centre 5 times and you get some rewards.
Well, you do it through the digital platform, but take a step back. A couple of weeks before we went into lockdown, Australia was on fire and Yorkshire was underwater. So the change in climate, whilst we've been distracted by the bug, hasn't gone away, and it's actually a bigger risk to society. If we do not deal with climate emergency, we are in big trouble, and the disruption we've seen with COVID will actually seem minimal compared to what we'll see if we don't deal with climate. Now, when you take a look at the 2 biggest contributors to climate footprint are transport and heating of homes. So the green recovery, which the UK Chancellor has suggested, I think is a wonderful opportunity for job creation, for innovation. I know the Dundee universities are always quite up with all of this type of thing, and then there will be job creation. So there will be a massive push to insulate our homes better, to use energy more efficiently, to build resilience into the national grid, to look at coming off grid. So, for example, building in solar farms on tops of roofs, to look at micro generation, so small wind, to look at battery storage, to look at EV infrastructure, to look at the manufacture of electric vehicles, whether it be cars or bicycles, and making sure that our energy system is sustainable and resilient. So there's lots of opportunities for town and city centres to plug into that. Then there's the green agenda, which again contributes to all of that. We need to prevent flooding because Scotland's going to become warmer and wetter. So if we have the rainwater gardens, we've got a proposal to put 100 rainwater gardens out almost immediately, which becomes 1,000 rainwater gardens within a year. That's how you get flood attenuation and you capture the water in a natural storage format rather than having to build in sustainable urban drainage systems, which are very expensive. We're looking at phenomenal tree planting across the place, greening up, pop-up parks, green space, all linked to health and well-being, but also the cleaner air. And then that links to the walking and cycling and the active travel agenda. So Dundee already has a reputation for being quite a green, attractive city. If you can play that card, you will attract investment, you will attract the right sort of people that you want to stay in your city. Your universities will benefit from all of that because they'll bring in researchers on a global basis. And all of a sudden you come up with a sort of the green capital of Scotland. So all places are moving towards that. There are some exemplars which tend to be sort of your Brodie Ferry type places. It's middle class people who are already converted to this, and it's easier for them to be specific about what to buy and how they get to work, etc. It's harder in more impoverished areas, and I know Dundee's got a mixture of both. So we'll have to think about behavioural shift among the sort of working class and the less able, because their lives sometimes are so fractured and they're so desperate just to try to survive that they're not worried about the climate. You know, they throw things down, it ends up in the sea and inside a fish's belly, and you end up eating it again. So it's a difficult thing, but I think getting into young people, you know, the eco schools concept, we need to push all of that further forward because the kids are genuinely much more careful about the environment and much more engaged about the environment than pale male stale people like me. So, you know, there's something about education of younger people and build on the message of a green Dundee, because I think a low carbon exemplar city is something that would actually benefit you in the longer run. And yes, there's lots of money from SEPA and Zero Waste and Scottish Government. A lot of this might be linked to the Place Infrastructure Fund that will come after the Town's Review, which will allow reducing the footprint within the town centre, building in better infrastructure. I'm thinking about, I mean, I'm not an evangelist when it comes to walking and cycling. I drink too much and I smoke too much and I can't cycle because I'm very unfit. So I actually believe what we should be doing is creating spaces for everybody. The Zurich model, the Scandinavian model. And when you go to holiday in Spain or Portugal, you don't see any signs banning cars and saying this is for cyclists only. Everything moderates at 4 miles an hour. You paint the infrastructure onto the ground. Cars have to behave. So if they do come into that city centre zone, they have to go 4 miles an hour. Otherwise, you know, they're not allowed to come in and play. The same as the disability scooter, the same as the woman with the pram, the same as the cyclist. Everything has to moderate at 4 miles an hour. That's open, inclusive. Delivery vehicles can get in. It's shared space. It's open to everybody. I don't believe in zoning off places just for one particular use. But at the minute, we have to sort of think our way through the pandemic. We have to allow people to socially distance. So there will be the odd compromise needed in terms of allowing people to walk and cycle and be 2 meters apart, unless they're in a pub where they can be 1 meter apart. So a green Dundee, I think, is building resilience and creating a compelling offer for people to come to Dundee, to stay in Dundee, to bring up a family in Dundee, for businesses to invest, because this green revolution is going to be the biggest economic opportunity that the country has. Job creation, wealth creation, Scotland should own it. Dundee should be a big player in it.
Well, I think that seems like a really good place to finish. We've got some really encouraging comments, no questions, but more observations about thanks to Phil for coming on and sharing and actually really inspiring everybody. People saying that they're delighted to see such a kind of a strong lead and a catalyst and collaboration for innovative ideas. So Phil, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to Sarah for coming on and telling us about Hudson International, and to everybody who joined in today. Like always, the webinars go on our YouTube channel, and we'll then share those far and wide again. So if you did miss us in person, but you're watching us on YouTube, then thanks so much for that. And Phil, thank you again. I'm sure it'll not be the last time we have you on, but maybe, well, wonder when we'll do this in person next. Who knows? But yeah, thank you for taking the time to come online for us today. Much appreciated. And enjoy the rest of your day, folks. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.